A lonely mechanic marries the town's outcast to protect his son, only to uncover a buried $200 billion secret beneath her inherited gas station. Before we begin, if you believe in the quiet magic of kindness and healing with love, subscribe, and let's walk this path together. The day Eli Cooper married June Holloway, the air hung low with dust and the smell of sun-baked rust. The town didn't clap. No music played. The only witness beyond his son and two stray cats was the hollow wind that ran its fingers through the gas station's bent awning. June wore an old denim dress that had faded into something like sky and sorrow. Her hair was tied back with twine. She said her vows in a voice so quiet, Eli had to watch her lips to understand. Theo, 8 years old and solemn in a too-big shirt, held the rings in a velvet pouch he'd found in his late mother's drawer. No one asked whose pouch it had been. The justice of the peace mispronounced June's last name. She didn't correct him. They signed the marriage certificate leaning against the hood of Eli's truck, its engine still ticking from the drive. June had no last-minute flowers. Eli had no speech. They exchanged rings like two people patching a roof before the storm came. After, Theo climbed into the bed of the truck and fell asleep with his head against a coil of hose. June didn't ask for a ride. She just started walking the short gravel stretch back to the station, barefoot, as if the earth itself was hers to claim. Eli watched her go, then got in the cab. He didn't start the engine. He just watched her until she disappeared behind the faded Texaco sign, her shoulders straight, her pace slow. Like she'd never been gone. The first time Eli had spoken to her was over a carburetor. She was hunched beneath the lifted hood of an old Dodge, arms deep in its rusting chest like she meant to resuscitate it with her own breath. "You need help?" he'd asked. She didn't look up. "It's the carb. I got one in my shop." "I'm not asking." Eli had nodded once and stood beside her for 3 full minutes before walking away. The next day, she left a jar of coffee grounds on his workbench. The day after that, Theo left her a drawing, himself, her, and a cat under a crooked rainbow. She pinned it behind the station counter without a word. The town had always had names for June. Witch, Wild Girl, Holloway's Ghost. Her mother had run the gas station for years, through drought and flood and loneliness. When she died, no one asked where June had gone. They just turned their heads whenever the Holloway name came up, like it carried a bad wind. But the day June returned, she came walking through Main Street like someone following a map only she could see. She had a backpack and a toolbox. She opened the gas station door with a rusted key and disappeared inside. Eli's house stood 1.5 miles from hers. A modest white structure with peeling paint and a porch swing that creaked even when the wind slept. He didn't keep photographs out anymore. Just tools, Theo's schoolwork, and his late wife's recipe card taped to the fridge, smudged where butter had once splattered across vanilla. He hadn't planned on marrying again. Not because he was mourning, grief had long settled into something less sharp, but because the house didn't feel unfinished. Just paused. Until he saw June trying to fix a gas pump with a wrench too small for the job. He didn't ask himself why he brought his tools over. Maybe it was her silence. Or the way Theo watched her from the truck, curious and unafraid. Maybe he just needed a reason to feel useful again. When the town started whispering, he didn't defend her. Not out loud. He just kept showing up. Fixing the awning. Replacing wiring. Bringing her old thermoses filled with coffee she never thanked him for, but always returned clean. One Sunday morning, Theo asked if she was going to be his mom now. Eli had paused in his shaving, razor held midair. "She's not your mom," he said gently. Theo nodded. "But maybe she could stay." Eli didn't answer. He rinsed the blade and tried not to look at the photo still tucked behind the mirror. His wife holding Theo as a baby, her face already fading into paper. It wasn't romance. It wasn't even companionship. It was need. Mutual and quiet. He asked her one evening as the sun dipped low behind the station. They sat on overturned buckets, watching the cat bat at a moth. "You ever think about moving in?" he asked, not looking at her. She didn't answer for a long time. Then, "I'm not good with people. I'm not people." She laughed once, like a splinter breaking free. He went on. "I've got room. And Theo, he likes you. Maybe we could help each other." She stared at the pump. The old numbers on its dial hadn't moved in years. "You'd be marrying a woman with ghosts," she said. Eli nodded. "I already live with a few." 2 days later, they stood in front of the station, and she said, "I guess this is home, then." Eli didn't say anything. He just offered her the passenger side of the truck. Now married, she moved into the house with a single duffel bag and a box labeled, "Don't open yet." She took the room across from Theo's. That night, she made chili from scratch and didn't speak while they ate. Theo handed her a fork wrapped in a napkin and whispered, "Welcome." She smiled, and something in her shoulders loosened. The next morning, the station door creaked open earlier than usual. She scrubbed the front windows, tied back the awning with new rope, and lit a cigarette she didn't smoke, just held between her fingers while watching the road. Eli stopped by mid-morning. Left a fresh oil filter on the counter. She nodded. He nodded. Neither said a word. Underneath the station, the wooden floor groaned. June paused. She looked down, frowning. That night, when the wind rose, a piece of flooring near the back room lifted slightly. June knelt down, ran her fingers along the crack. Something had slipped between the planks. She dug with a knife until her fingertips met paper, old, brittle, and damp. She pulled it out. A map, hand-drawn. The ink smudged but still legible. Surveyor lines. A red X near the station's eastern border. Numbers in faded pencil. She unfolded the whole thing, breathing shallow. At the bottom corner, in her mother's unmistakable handwriting, it said, "Tell no one until they ask the wrong questions." She stared at the page long after the wind had died. Up the road, Eli was brushing Theo's teeth while the boy hummed the tune of something unplaceable. He wondered what June was doing, and if she ever hummed when no one was watching. The gas station slept. So did the cats. The sky, though, remained wide-eyed, watching, waiting, as if it, too, remembered what lay buried below. And in the dark, the map whispered from beneath the bed where June slid it for now. A secret not quite ready to rise, but no longer content to stay hidden. Outside, a tumbleweed rolled across the road. Nothing else moved. But the wind had changed direction. And that was enough. They lived like two wild things learning the edge of a shared territory, never touching, rarely speaking, but always circling each other's quiet. June rose before dawn. She moved barefoot through Eli's house like someone drifting between dreams and daylight. Her footsteps were so soft Theo once asked if she floated. In truth, she simply remembered how to move without stirring ghosts. She didn't rearrange anything. Not the dusty mugs hanging from their hooks, not the cluttered catch-all drawer beside the stove. She only added small things, a ceramic salt cellar shaped like a fish, her mother's quilt folded at the foot of the couch, a teabag jar that clicked softly each time she opened it. Theo left her little notes on napkins. "Do you like mustard? The cat needs a name. I think you're nice." She answered none of them directly, but he began finding toffee candies in his coat pockets. Sometimes, a folded paper frog on his pillow. Once, he found his school photo, creased and bent, taped to the back of the pantry door, next to a small sketch of a woman and a little boy under a gas station sign. Eli watched all this from a distance. He moved slower now, less like a man avoiding the past, and more like one learning to share space with it. They ate meals together, though rarely at the same time. June preferred the hush of late night, Eli the steadiness of early morning. But they began leaving things for each other, an extra slice of cornbread on the stove, the coffee pot still warm, a wrench placed exactly where the other would need it next. The town kept its distance. They had expected June to vanish again, or implode. Instead, she swept the gas station floor every morning, kept the pump logs meticulous, and added a small chalkboard that read, "Still here." That was enough to set tongues wagging. One night, someone spray-painted the word, "Witch," across the cinderblock wall out back. Eli painted over it before Theo could see. June didn't say a word. But the next day, the chalkboard outside read, "Still here. Nice try." She found the ledger by accident. The floorboard in the back storage room had warped with the last summer rain. She was storing a crate of expired windshield wipers when it groaned under her weight. Beneath the plank was a metal tin wrapped in oilcloth. Inside, her mother's ledger, pale blue ink, handwritten columns, pages stained with thumbprints and fuel. The usual notes, suppliers, fuel totals, customer tabs, but also strange entries buried among the rows. X. Vault access fee, $1,100. CD valve release, partial. Transfer request denied, hold file 63E. On the last page, a set of coordinates. Far too precise to be street addresses. June sat on the concrete floor, the tin beside her. The air smelled of mildew and rubber, and a cat mewed from the open door. Her fingers trembled only slightly as she turned the last page and found a key. Brass, small, cold, tied in fraying ribbon. She didn't open the box again that day. At home, Eli was teaching Theo how to gap a spark plug. The boy's hands were smudged, face sunbright. When June stepped into the garage, Eli nodded toward a glass of lemonade already waiting on the shelf. "You find anything interesting today?" he asked casually, not looking up. June blinked, then said, "Dust." He smiled. That night, Theo asked her again, "Are you my second mom now?" She paused in the doorway. "Do you want me to be?" He thought for a moment, swinging his legs off the bed. "You don't have to be. You can just be June." She nodded. "That's enough, I think." She tucked him in, then reached into her pocket. She pulled out a tiny matchbox, opened it. Inside, a painted pebble shaped like a fox. "I found this by the pump when I was little," she said. "I used to think it was lucky." He smiled. She left it on his nightstand. Later, in the living room, Eli stood by the open window. The wind brought a scent of creosote and distance. June stood beside him, silent. "My wife used to hum," he said after a while. "Late at night, when she thought I was asleep." June didn't answer, but she reached into the side pocket of her duffel and pulled out a cassette tape. Labeled in faded pen, "Lullaby. My mother recorded this the day I left town. Told me I'd want to remember something soft when the world went sharp." Eli set it in the old tape deck. They listened. A woman's voice, slightly off-key, humming a simple melody that curled like smoke around the silence. The next morning, a black car pulled into the station. Chrome too polished, tires too quiet. A man stepped out wearing a charcoal suit and sunglasses, despite the clouded sky. "Good morning," he said, voice smooth as oil. "Is the owner around?" June nodded. "I am." He looked around slowly. "Nice location. Old family business." She didn't answer. "We've been surveying properties in the area," he continued. "Energy interest. Strategic development. I imagine you've been approached before." June's jaw shifted slightly. "This place isn't for sale." "Everything's for sale," the man replied with a smile. "Eventually." He left a business card on the counter and drove off, tires whispering against the gravel. June didn't pick up the card. That evening, she dug up the brass key again and traced the coordinates on the ledger with the tip of her pen. She wrote a letter, to herself, though she addressed it to no one. If they found this place again, then the story was never finished. If you dig, remember you're not just chasing ghosts. You're waking them. She folded the letter and slipped it into a sealed envelope. Then she buried it beside the old pump, 5 inches deep. Just enough to keep the wind from carrying it off. The next morning, Eli found her standing by the gas station sign, watching the road. "They come back?" he asked. She nodded once. "Slick shoes and silver lies." He looked toward the pump, then at her. "You hiding something?" She didn't flinch. "I'm protecting it." "From who?" She didn't answer. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a coin. Flipped it once. Caught it. Looked at her again. "I trust you," he said simply. She exhaled, almost a laugh. "You shouldn't." "I know." They sat on the porch that night, Theo drawing in chalk on the walkway. "You think they'll try again?" Eli asked. June nodded. "They always do." He didn't press. Instead, he handed her a mug of tea and pulled the quilt over their knees. The silence between them was no longer cold. Somewhere deep beneath the station, the air shifted, just slightly, as if remembering it still had something to say. And 2 miles west, buried behind barbed fences and brush, a hatch waited beneath layers of dirt and time. A lock untouched for 20 years. A vault filled with machines no one had come to claim. Not yet. But they were coming. June just didn't know if she'd be ready to let the truth rise, or bury it deeper. The desert swallowed sound the way it swallowed everything. Slowly, until all that was left was heat, dust, and the low hum of things not meant to wake. June stood at the fence line, the map clutched tight in her palm. The brush was thick here, wild and clawed. Behind it, a sagging substation crouched like a rusted sentinel. It had no sign, no name, just bolts, concrete, and a silence that felt older than the land. She slipped through the break in the wire just after dawn, moving quiet as shadow. The key was tied to her neck now, the ribbon damp with sweat. Her boots stirred red dirt that hadn't been touched in decades. The hatch was where the map said it'd be, half covered in sand, hidden behind the old generator frame. A square of corroded steel with a keyhole in the center. She knelt beside it, brushing away layers of grit and time. When she turned the key, the lock didn't resist. It clicked once, sharp and final, and the hatch groaned open an inch. The air that rose from the vault was not fresh. It smelled like oil, metal, and something faintly electrical, like the breath of a sleeping engine. A narrow stairway led down. June moved slowly, her hand tracing the cold pipe railing. Each step creaked under her weight. The light came from below, emergency strips still glowing weak green along the walls, as if waiting for her. The vault was long and low-ceilinged. Rows of cylindrical tanks lined one side, sealed and stamped with faded serial numbers. On the far wall, a control panel blinked red, idle but not dead. June walked past a desk scattered with papers, dust thick as gauze. She brushed one clean. It was a production record, signed by an energy contractor, dated 15 years ago. It listed quantities of gas not listed on any public ledger. Next to each, Q extract, experimental, contained. She scanned the names, small initials, signatures she didn't recognize. Then, one near the bottom, M. Holloway. Her mother. June exhaled so slowly it felt like shedding skin. She opened a file cabinet, its metal screeching like protest. Inside, she found documents labeled Vault Property 63E, Strategic Hold. Handwritten notes detailed the suspension of a quantum fuel project after a scandal involving embezzlement, non-compliance, and a corporate seizure of land that was never lawfully ratified. Her fingers tightened. She closed the drawer, heart hammering not with fear but with the unbearable weight of knowing. Her mother hadn't run a gas station. She'd run a gate. A gate to something that powerful men thought they'd buried. June left the vault with dirt on her hands and dust in her mouth. She didn't lock the hatch. She didn't need to. The desert would cover it again soon enough. At home, Eli was checking the pressure on Theo's bike tires when he saw her walking up the road, slow and steady, like a woman dragging a storm behind her. He didn't call out. She didn't say anything until the sun was down. They sat at the kitchen table, June's hands curled around a chipped mug, Eli silent across from her. Theo was asleep, the lullaby tape low on the player in the other room. She told him everything. About the ledger, the key, the vault, the project no one had finished but no one had forgotten, the visit from the man in the suit, the proof she found, documents signed by her mother, the ghostly trail of something more than oil. She didn't ask for permission, just laid it out between them like an offering or a wound. Eli listened without moving, eyes fixed on her face. When she stopped, he leaned back and took a long breath. "You married me to survive," she said finally, voice flat. "It's okay. That's what I was doing too." Eli looked at her, then away. "No," he said after a pause. "I married you because I saw a woman keeping the whole damn sky from falling. I just didn't know how heavy it was." She didn't cry, but her hand trembled when she reached for the teapot. They sat there, not as strangers anymore, but as people bound by something too big for words. Not love, maybe. Not yet. But something better rooted. The next day, Eli took a walk around the property, eyes scanning the skyline, counting shadows. That afternoon, he moved his rifle from the attic to the truck cab. June didn't stop him. She found an old map in the back office of the station and began marking out the landlines, tracing boundaries with red chalk. She found discrepancies between what the title claimed and what the vault documents described. Whole acres missing. Others doubled. She didn't need a lawyer yet. But she started writing letters. Quietly. Carefully. 3 days passed. Then Theo found the letter. He came in from the station yard, barefoot, holding a wrinkled envelope. "This was under the dirt by the pump," he said. "Was it for me?" June took it slowly. Her breath hitched. It was her mother's handwriting. The seal was smudged, but the ink inside was still legible. A single page, folded twice. "If you're reading this, they've come back. You'll know them by the way they smile too long and ask too little. Don't give them anything. Not the land. Not the name. This place wasn't bought. It was stolen. And what they buried isn't theirs to reclaim. M." June folded the letter and tucked it into the tin where the ledger had been. Later that night, she watched Eli fixing the porch light. Theo was inside, humming to himself, arranging his toy trucks by height. She spoke softly, like testing the shape of the words. What if we keep it? The land. The secret. Eli looked down at the screwdriver in his hand. Then we better be ready to defend it. June nodded. I'm tired of giving things up. He reached over and flipped the switch. The light came on, dim, steady. They sat together on the porch as the stars came out, quiet but not alone. Above them, the sky stretched open like a book no one had finished reading. And down the road, near the edge of town, the same black car passed again. Slower this time. Watching. Waiting. But the lights at the gas station never flickered. The pumps stood still and silent. And inside, buried now not just by dirt but by resolve, the vault waited, no longer forgotten, no longer alone. By the time the black sedans returned, the station had already been swept twice that morning. June had brewed a fresh pot of coffee, the radio played a scratchy Patsy Cline song, and Eli stood out front, polishing a crescent wrench with a rag that had once been part of his wedding shirt. Theo was drawing chalk stars on the concrete, singing to himself in quiet hums, while the stray cats slept like question marks in the sun. The day was ordinary in every way except for how still the air had become. The car pulled in too smooth, too quiet. The man who stepped out wore the same smile as last time, but it didn't reach his eyes. This time, he had two others with him. One held a briefcase, the other stood with folded arms and scanned the perimeter like he was already calculating how much the land could be paved over. "We're prepared to make a formal offer," the lead man said, sliding his sunglasses into his coat pocket. "The numbers are generous. Very." June didn't look at the paper he offered. "I told you before. It's not for sale." He smiled wider. "This isn't a negotiation. It's a kindness. We'd rather avoid legal disputes." Eli stepped forward, slow and deliberate, wiping his hands on the rag. "You threatening us?" "Of course not." The man chuckled. "We're simply suggesting that a woman of your background might prefer a quiet retirement. A clean exit." Behind them, Theo picked up his chalk and began drawing a red line through one of the stars. June said nothing. She turned, walked back inside the station, and came out with a manila folder, its corners soft from years spent in the dark. She handed it over with both hands. "Here's my background," she said. Inside was a court record from 1973, proof of improper seizure, incomplete land transfer, a grandfather's name erased by a bureaucratic sleight of hand and never legally corrected. Attached was a notarized claim, refiled weeks ago, marked "under review" in clean blue ink. The man with the briefcase opened it, scanned the first page, and his face dropped half a shade. "You've been busy," he said. June didn't reply. Eli stepped forward again and placed a hand on the porch rail. "You'll want to get off our land now," he said, voice calm. The man hesitated, then nodded once. "We'll be in touch." The car reversed slow, the tires whispering over the dust. June stood there until the tail lights vanished. That evening, she took the key off the ribbon around her neck and placed it on the kitchen table. "I think we're going to need someone who speaks their language," she said. Eli called an old friend, a lawyer who once bartered his legal work for carburetors and lemon pies. He arrived the next day, wearing cracked boots and a wide grin. His name was McCrae, and he had a memory like a steel trap. He read the ledger, the map, the vault documents, the court claim, and the letter from her mother. When he finished, he took off his hat, scratched his scalp, and said, "Damn! You married into something fierce, Cooper." "Tell me about it," Eli said. McCrae filed the paperwork the next morning. The men in suits didn't return, but someone did leave a dead cat by the station door that night. June buried it herself. She didn't tell Theo. She didn't cry. Instead, she planted lavender over the grave and said, softly. No one's running this time. The town began to shift. At first, it was just silence. Then, slow nods in the grocery line. A stranger left a bouquet of marigolds by the pump with a note. I always liked your mother. A mother brought her daughter to buy candy, and when June handed her the change, their fingers touched, and neither flinched. Eli opened a second bay at the garage. Work picked up. June added a small shelf near the window and filled it with tea tins and postcards. Theo painted a sign in crooked letters. Family owned. One afternoon, June found Eli standing in the backyard, staring out over the ridge. You okay? She asked. He nodded, then hesitated. Why didn't you run when they came? She looked down at her hands. Because this is the only place that ever looked at me and didn't ask me to leave. He stepped closer. His hand touched her back, just briefly. The next day, the final letter arrived. McCrae opened it first. Settlement confirmed, he said, grinning wide. Claims yours now. On record, sealed and stamped. This whole place, everything under it, too. June took the letter. It felt too light in her hands. That evening, she burned it. Eli didn't ask why. He just watched her do it. The fire was clean. The sky blushed pink. Theo lay on the porch, reading a comic book to the cats. June turned to him after the ashes cooled. It's not about money, she said. It's about what she left. And what we're building. He nodded. You think she knew? I think she knew we'd stay. In the days that followed, wildflowers bloomed along the edge of the station lot. Theo planted them, one by one, carrying them in his little hands like treasure. The chalkboard outside now read, still here. Still ours. The vault stayed locked. Covered again. Hidden. Some secrets don't need to be used. Just protected. That night, June knelt by the pump and rested her hand over the buried letter. The one she'd written herself weeks ago. She didn't open it. Just sat there, her fingers curled against the earth. Eli stepped onto the porch and called softly, Theo's ready for bed. She looked up, nodded, and stood. The wind tugged gently at her hair. We're home now, Mama, she whispered. The sky above them turned deep and dark, scattered with stars. Inside, the tape played again. A lullaby, warbled but clear. And the station, once forgotten, now glowed with life. If this story touched you, subscribe or share where you're watching from. These stories matter.